Most people think business lessons come from crisis, but mine didn't. My lessons came long before that, quietly, gradually, over a few decades of watching companies succeed, stumble, collapse, or scale. And if I'm being honest, I didn't know how valuable those lessons were until the world changed. Now, I started this podcast in December of that year, so it is essentially a 5-year marker here. But when that 2020 arrived, when isolation hit and the noise amplified, everything I had believed about leadership, systems, and ownership were suddenly put under a stress test. Not to teach me something new, but to put me into a proving ground for what I had already learned. And those next 5 years, from 2020 to 2025, became the period where everything clicked. The patterns I'd seen for years finally solidified. The gaps became obvious. The truths became unavoidable. And in that space, the quiet, the uncertain, the lack of visibility, I discovered the ideas that eventually became Built to Scale, and the Owner's Advisory Board, and the entire Entrepreneur Strategic Briefing series. Today, I'm going to walk you through that journey, because if you're the kind of owner who feels responsible for everything, who carries the weight alone, who wants freedom but stays involved out of necessity, this story is your story too. Welcome to the Budding Entrepreneur Podcast. I'm Randy Bridges, business advisor, consultant, coach, and trusted partner to service-based business owners who are serious about performance, profit, and progress. This podcast exists to do one thing: help you solve the real problems that stall your growth, kill momentum, and burn out the very people who built your business. So let's get started, shall we? All right. And welcome to episode 228 of the Budding Entrepreneur Podcast. I'm your host, Randy Bridges. If you're like many of the owners I work with today, those high-achieving, operationally minded ones, you didn't become an owner because you wanted a title. You became an owner because you were good at what you did, great in many cases. People trusted you, clients relied on you, quality mattered, and you always delivered it. And in the beginning, that's enough. Skill carries you. Effort compensates, and your standards keep everything moving. But at some point, the business grows beyond your reach. And the real question becomes, what actually carries the business forward when I'm not the one holding it up? For me, the answer didn't appear all at once. It formed over a decade. And it was refined through 5 hard years of learning what worked and what absolutely didn't. It was validated during the COVID years, that wonderful journey, 2020 on up to now, and it's the bridge to how Built to Scale stands today. Let me take you back to where it really began. Long before COVID, long before the podcast, and before the programs, I'd already spent years inside other people's companies, and I started noticing patterns, the same ones that showed up in every service business, no matter the industry. We're talking about an owner who works harder than everyone else, a team that depends on the owner for direction, the processes that exist only in someone's head, the quality that relies on individual heroics, and finally, decisions that bottleneck at the top. I didn't have a name for it back then, but I knew something was off. I kept seeing companies with great people, great products, and great potential, but they couldn't move unless the owner pushed on them. Meanwhile, the companies that scaled, no matter how small, all seemed to share one thing. The right people were in the right places, doing the right things at the right time. Aces in their places was what I'd heard it called, and I saw it over and over again. Not big teams, not expensive teams, not flashy teams. Intentional teams. But I didn't yet know the full implication of what I was seeing in these businesses. That understanding didn't arrive until the world turned upside down, after years of me already running my own business. Let's talk about what I call the validation years. In 2020 and 21, everything changed except the truths that I had already discovered. Suddenly, we had no in-person meetings, no walking in a client's door, no looking over someone's shoulder, no proximity, no visibility. Everything I relied on for clarity had disappeared. And that's when it happened. All of those patterns that I observed for years were suddenly amplified. The companies that were built on effort usually collapsed into chaos. The ones held together by the owner fell apart when the owner couldn't be everywhere, and the ones without structure flat out panicked. But the companies that had clean decision lanes, well-designed roles, clear communication rhythms, and trustworthy workflow, they didn't just survive, they were flourishing. And that 2-year period didn't teach me anything new as much as it proved everything I already believed. Sure, the world had changed, but the laws of a healthy business had not. Looking at 2021 and 22, I call those the struggle years. They were my toughest years, not because work slowed down. It was because the cracks in my own business became impossible to ignore. I was literally trying to do too much myself, hire around my weaknesses, to delegate the tasks instead of the decisions, to build processes out of habits, and maintain quality by being everywhere, right? It's the way you really want to think about it. And it's just like the companies I watched for years, but I fell into the trap that a lot of them do. I wanted to keep the business small, manageable, comfortable, but I also wanted freedom. And I got to tell you, those two things were not compatible with the way I was operating. I couldn't do it alone. I didn't want a big team. I didn't trust delegation without clarity, and I didn't want to lose control. I wanted the sweet spot that every owner secretly wants. I wanted a business that runs cleanly without losing the quality I built it on. But wanting it didn't make it real. And I had to change both the way the business worked and the way I worked in order to get myself out of this trap. Jumping to 2023, this is when everything started coming into focus for me. After years of consulting, watching owners struggle, watching teams falter, I finally understood the underlying truth. The companies that scale aren't run on effort, they're run on architecture. We're talking about decision making, accountability, visibility, team structure, capacity, workflow. It wasn't about how hard anyone worked. It was about how well everything around them was designed. And that led me to the insight that changed my life. Effort builds output. Effective systems, though, build a business that you can trust. And that became the turning point, the moment I stopped being the system and started building one. And that realization led me to 2024, which was my rebuild. It's where I rebuilt everything. My decision-making became structured. Workflow became intentional. Visibility became non-negotiable. The roles had to become clear. The delegation became about outcomes, not tasks. And team design became precise, not bloated, not fragile. Over the past few episodes, you've heard me talk about some of the transformations that have gone on. And helping out these clients was part of my own proof that this system was actually going to work for me. I finally understood the truth behind aces in their places. See, you don't need a large team, you need the right team, in the right structure, following the right systems. That's the lesson that I had to keep learning and seeing in the clients that were coming to me, because as I was encountering their problems, I kept seeing that flip back pointing to the importance of what I had learned on my own. Once I aligned the people and systems, the business started moving on its own. Now, the shift was simple, but it was profound because I stopped scaling my effort and I started scaling my structure. And by 2025, those patterns, systems, lessons, and observations, everything I'd been refining finally crystallized into one idea that I call capacity. Not time capacity, not workload capacity, but organizational capacity. The space your business can create for you when it runs on systems instead of effort. And that became the foundation for Built to Scale, my 3-system model, the owner-to-operator transformation, the owner's advisory board, and the entire Entrepreneur Strategic Briefing series. See, it was never theory, it was never hype, it was never guesswork. It was structure that emerged from 5 years of refining, which I'd experienced decades before. And most importantly, to have it all proven under pressure. Let me call out my avatar directly. Nicholas, because that's what I call him. You truly are me about 10 years ago, so this is just for you. If you're listening to this and you're carrying too much, or you feel responsible for everything, maybe even trying to protect what you've built by doing more instead of designing better, let me tell you something I wish someone had told me. You don't fix operator problems with owner effort. You fix them with owner architecture. And that architecture begins with building decision systems, workflow systems, visibility systems. These are the systems that create trust. Trust creates capacity, and capacity creates freedom. Freedom is what real ownership feels like. Now, if you want clarity on exactly where your business is stuck, whether it's decisions, workflow, maybe even visibility, the Scaling Breakthrough Scorecard will show you all the points you need to know. It's the same structure I used while rebuilding my own business, and the same one I use today with every owner inside the Built to Scale ecosystem. You'll find the link in the description below. In closing reflection, the last decade taught me the patterns. COVID proved them. 5 years later, I refined them into a solid system. Because effort will always build output, but only effective systems build a business you can trust. And as you look at the week ahead, remember, build it smart, run it clean, stay aligned. That's it for this episode. I hope you picked up some valuable insights and maybe even sparked a few new ideas. If you want to keep the conversation going or maybe even explore partnerships, don't hesitate to reach out. And hey, don't forget to subscribe, leave a review, and share this with someone who needs to hear it. The steps you take today could be the start of something big tomorrow. For the budding entrepreneur, I wish you the best in your health, your wealth, your business, your family, everything about you. Take care, and we'll see you back here next week.